welcome to the show. We have a very important guest on today. We have attorney Gregory J. White, and he is Chief of Staff and General Counsel from the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. And he's here today to talk to us about some very important things that the Office of Business Regulation works on, such as identity theft, hacking, and how we can keep ourselves safe and avoid these very common problems.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on the show. You know, as we were talking before the show, a lot of times when people hear consumer affairs, they automatically think of the Attorney General's office. That's an important part of what they do, but we're a separate state agency. We regulate businesses, and the Attorney General's office enforces our actions. So we work very closely with them, but we're a separate agency, and we have a pretty broad mandate. We have 5 agencies under our umbrella. Again, as we were talking before the show, the Undersecretary Chapman likes to say that we regulate Main Street America. So you drive down any main street, and most of the businesses we license or regulate in some fashion. So banks, mortgage companies, barber shop, cosmetologists, state-chartered credit unions, all fall under the Office of Consumer Affairs.
And they're home improvement contractors.
Home improvement contracting, which is a big part of what we do. So we have a pretty broad mandate, and beginning with the Division of Insurance, they regulate a $50 billion industry, from healthcare to property insurance to auto insurance. They oversee 1,600 insurance companies and over 100,000 agents or producers. And one of the most important parts of the Division of Insurance is the Surcharge Appeal Board. Most people are familiar with it. You get in an accident, and if you're more than 50%, you're surcharged. We're the only board in the United States that operates this way. All the other states, 49, if you're involved in an accident, your insurance company determines whether or not you're going to be held responsible for it, which is a bit of a conflict of interest. We have a surcharge appeal board. Last year there were 30,000 appeals. 2/3 of them were vacated, and so it's a very important part of what they do. So we have the Division of Insurance. We have the Division of Banks, which oversees about 200 state-chartered banks and credit unions with $400 billion worth of assets. In addition to that, they have what they call the non-depository licensees, so loan officers, debt collectors, check cashing businesses, all fall under the Division of Banks. We have the Division of Standards, which I'll talk more about it as we go along, but they're responsible for licensing gas stations and fuel pumps, among other things. They also license auto body repair shops as well as glass repair shops. And one of their biggest initiatives these days is looking out for skimming devices, which they're putting in gas pumps, throughout the United States.
Yeah, that's the really scary one.
It is, and it results in millions of dollars being lost to consumers. So that's their focus. Then we have the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, which regulates the telecommunications and cable industry. And then our biggest agency is the Division of Professional Licensure. They license about 500,000 licensees in Massachusetts, from electricians to sheet metal workers to plumbers, veterinarians, accountants, amongst other things. They recently consolidated with the Department of Public Safety. It was under Article 87. Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito were looking to save the Commonwealth money, so they consolidated the Department of Public Safety with the Division of Professional Licensure, saving thousands of dollars to the Commonwealth. So in addition to overseeing all these licensees, they also oversee building inspectors. They oversee amusement parks, Ultimate Fighting, the Boxing Commission. They oversee elevator inspectors, among other things. So they have a pretty broad mandate, and they put together what they call e-licensing about 18 months, 2 years ago, in which it allows for the licensee, rather than coming into Boston or mailing their license in, that they can renew or obtain a license online, and it saved a lot of time for tradespeople in Massachusetts. So
Wow.
that's
Is there anything you don't do? I mean, good grief, that's a lot.
well, we don't do.
That's quite a list.
Yeah. We it's one of the biggest agencies out
Right.
there, but you know, at the end of the day, again, the Undersecretary likes to say that we have a dual mission. One is protecting consumers, and the other is being there for businesses. You know, when Governor Baker was running for governor, his big thing was we need to cut down the time it takes to become licensed in Massachusetts,
Right.
and we've done made significant inroads in that, especially with e-licensing, that you can become licensed in a fraction of a time that it used to take, and that way it enables businesses to operate more productively, if
Right.
you will, and at the same time, we're there to protect consumers and educate consumers. So those are the 5 divisions that are under the Office of Consumer Affairs, but in addition to that, we have our own mandate. So we oversee the do not call list along with the federal government.
Oh, I need to call you about that one.
Right,
and
yeah.
Put myself back on that do not call list.
Absolutely. So, I mean, although people say to me, you know, I'm getting calls from these scammers and
Right.
whatnot, and our response to that, if they're not going to abide by the law, they're not going to abide by the do not
Right,
call
call
list,
list, of
right?
course,
So,
right, of course.
we oversee the data breach
Right.
along with the Attorney General's office, which is a big issue
Right.
these days. So if you're an entity and you're holding personal information of a Massachusetts resident,
Right.
that information has been breached, you're required to notify our office the nature of the breach, how many Mass residents were impacted, and what steps you've taken to address that. And we've been busy these days
I'm
with
sure.
with
Yeah.
all the breaches
There's a
out
lot.
there.
There's a lot you oversee, and in addition to that, now you have to oversee the security and the
Yeah,
breaches. It's-
absolutely.
it's-
You know, so that's an important part of what we do. We have the limit law arbitration program. So if you've been aggrieved by purchasing a new or pre-owned vehicle, you can apply to arbitration through our program. One of the most important programs that we have is the home improvement contracting. Again, before the show, we were talking.
Right.
Billions of dollars are spent. Over $3.4 billion was spent
Right.
just in Massachusetts alone
Right.
last year. So if you're a home improvement contractor and you're doing business in Massachusetts, you're required to register with our office. It requires you to pay a one-time fee into the guarantee fund, which I'll talk about in a moment, and provide a registration fee. You renew every 2 years. We oversee a complaint process. So if you're a homeowner and you've been aggrieved by a contract, you can file a complaint with our office. You are not a party to the complaint, you're a witness, but our hearing officers can either find that there's no basis for it and dismiss the complaint against a contractor. They can suspend the contractor's registration, revoke the contractor's registration, or fine the contractor. And we maintain a database, and we urge consumers that before they enter into a contract, they want to make sure it's a written contract, that the contractor's registered, and then go on our website to determine whether or not there's been any complaints
Right.
against that
Right.
individual. Because at the end of the day, most people's biggest asset is
Right.
their
It's
home.
their home, right.
And you can't even do the smallest project
Right.
without spending thousands of dollars.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you do your due diligence,
sure.
you know. In addition to that, if in fact you've been aggrieved by a contract or a contractor, you can file, provided you meet the criteria, with a guarantee fund. If you meet the criteria, you can recoup up to $10,000. So
Right.
that's part of what the contractors pay into the guarantee fund. When we took over the program, it was it needed a lot of work, and we've been working very closely with the building inspectors because we want to level the playing
Sure.
field. You know, when I came on board, I'd hear from contractors that, you know, I'm registered, I'm insured, I'm all properly
Right.
licensed, and there's someone out there who
Right.
isn't and can, you know, outbid me.
Right,
You know,
right.
so and I also like to point out that most contractors are there to do great work.
Right.
You know, and they take pride in their work. But like any,
Right.
there's good apples and
Sure.
bad apples, and unfortunately, we see the bad apples. We've had horror stories. We had a woman in Natick last fall who gave a contractor over $60,000 as a down payment, and the project was to remove the roof, put an in-law apartment on the second floor, and do some more renovations. The contractor removed the roof, took the $70,000, and then disappeared.
Oh, no.
This is in November with no
gosh.
roof. And so, you know, we're working closely with the Attorney General's
Right.
office to go after these contractors who
Right.
fleece consumers. We're working with the Springfield Hamden
Right.
DA's office, again, on another contractor or scammed a
Right.
homeowner.
Right.
So,
At least if you're going to swindle the $60,000, at least leave the roof on.
exactly.
You know,
You
for
know,
grief,
you
in
take the
November,
money.
that's just
right.
heartless.
And we also advise consumers that by law, they can only require you to pay a third up front. Now they can require you to pay for any of the materials
Right.
aside for that, but I mean, we've had stories and we've had calls where contractors are asking for 100% up front, which
Right.
makes absolutely no sense at all.
Right.
The other thing is, as I said, we're working closely with building inspectors. I send out a letter once a year. I just sent out our annual letter asking building inspectors before they allow a contractor to pull the permit that they make sure that they're properly licensed and registered. And we advise consumers that if you're using a general contractor, that you shouldn't pull the permit. That's what you're paying the contractor to do. Because if the contractor pulls the if the homeowner pulls a permit, it voids your ability to collect against the guaranteed funds. So, you know, we advise consumers, again, to do the due diligence, make sure that the contractor has all their registrations and licenses and are properly insured, and at the end of the day, make sure it's a written contract. So that's our biggest program that we oversee, and we're approaching 30,000 registered contractors in Massachusetts. Lastly, we have the hotline. We have 4 students from Northeastern, which is responsible for taking calls from consumers. They take hundreds of calls a week, and they're not attorneys. They're not there to give legal advice, but what they're there to do is answer basic questions, and if they don't have the question, to connect that consumer with the appropriate agency. Again, Governor Baker talked about at the beginning of his administration about taking down the silos, working with sister agencies to make it to allow for businesses to operate more
Without
smoothly
snags.
and without snags, if you will.
It just makes it much more efficient.
Absolutely.
Right.
So as part of taking these calls,
Right.
they get calls for identity theft and various scams.
Sure.
And you know, what we advise consumers to do is just be vigilant. You know, again, before the show we were talking, I spent
Right.
14 years as a prosecutor.
Right.
Back in the day when I was a young prosecutor, identity theft consisted of someone losing their wallet.
Right.
And you used to have your social security number
Right.
on it, and then they were off and running. Now someone doesn't even have to leave their home,
Right.
and they can hack into your system. So we advise consumers that one of the things is to change your password and change it often.
Okay.
Recently, my brother who lives in Europe contacted me to tell me that, you know, you need to change your password. Your password's
Right.
been hacked. So I changed it to numerous
Yeah.
numbers and 2
Right.
words that couldn't be associated with
Right.
me. And my son and I were recently doing a half marathon out of state. And just before the gun went off, I was trying to access iTunes, and I couldn't get in. So he said, "Give me your password." Well, by the time I put the password in, it's so long,
Yeah.
the gun went off, and
Oh,
everyone
gosh.
started running by us. But the point is,
But
no
at
one's
least
going
no one's going to hack
exactly,
you, so it's all right.
Exactly.
Spend a few minutes, like.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
all right.
it's worth that.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's all
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
It's all good.
So we advise also consumers to be more vigilant when discarding documents.
Right.
You've heard of
Yes,
paper shredders.
so they can piece back together again.
Yeah,
Right.
they can, but it takes a little work.
So what do you do? Go outside and burn everything? I
Well,
mean,
you
just-
can you can do that, but even a shredder
Right.
creates a bit of an obstacle because
Sure.
people will. It's amazing
Yeah.
what they'll. You know, you've heard of the term dumpster divers,
Right,
where
yes.
people go and they'll throw out their tax returns,
Right,
the Social Security
right.
numbers. You know, so invest in a paper shredder.
Or it doesn't have to be a cross cutter. It can just be a standard paper
It's
shredder.
even
as long as
even a
just shredded.
standard, you
Right.
know. I mean,
Right.
it creates enough of a hurdle
Right.
that they'll move on and
You don't have to separate it into 7 trash cans.
Exactly.
Once you just shred it once.
Exactly,
Right,
you're
okay, it's
you're
good
all
to know.
set. And then the other area of identity theft that our office frequently has to deal with is skimming devices that we, again, talked about before the show.
Right.
They're showing
Those are
up.
really scary.
They are, because they're showing up in gas pumps. You know, you asked me how they can access that. So they'll go in the dead of the night and they'll pull
out
over
the wires.
And what they'll do is insert this
right
device.
there?
Yes.
And duct tape it to it.
Exactly, and now they use Bluetooth. So back in the day when our investigators would find these, they would go out and wait for the individual to return. Now they access all the information with Bluetooth. They leave it there. It's a cost of doing business. And they're not only showing up on fuel pumps, but ATM machines, scanners in department stores. They have handheld skimming devices. So people will walk through airports or bus terminals or malls, and they'll brush up against you and download your information from your purse. So we've been utilizing these. These are protective sleeves. You put your credit card in there, and it protects them from downloading your information.
Like what? Just at the airport, or like
at the airport
they walk
or
by
mall.
you and they can just scan you.
Yep, with a handheld underneath their sleeve.
So even if your credit card is in your wallet, in your purse, or in your bag,
they can still access the information.
Oh, wow.
You know.
So each card should have one of these.
Yeah, and they come in a variety of different forms, multiple sleeves that you can purchase. Again, they're showing up in ATM machines. What they'll do is they'll mount a camera up top, and that will be capturing your PIN number, and then the device in the machine will capture the credit card information.
Wow.
And we work very closely with the Secret Service and the FBI when these skimming devices are found. We recently had a cybersecurity conference at the Boston Fed, and we invited financial institutions from throughout Massachusetts. We had members of the FBI there to talk about identity theft. And one of the stories that the agent talked about was a mom and pop store up in upstate New York. They had put these skimming devices in some of their machines. It was a high tourism area. They then distributed the information worldwide to 30 countries with the caveat that you want to release it until you get a certain date and time. When you get the green light, release the information. Within a couple hours, millions of dollars have been lost. And that's just one small
little area.
Exactly. So, again, as we were saying, it's not a matter of whether or not you or I are going to be a victim of identity theft. That's a given. The only question is when it's going to happen and how often it's going to happen. So you can take steps as a consumer once you have been a victim of identity theft. First off, you notify the bank, cancel the credit cards, you monitor your bank statements, and most importantly, you monitor your credit report. By law, they're required to give you a free credit report a year. Monitor that, and one of the most important things you can do is put a credit freeze on it, which will prevent someone who has your information from being able to utilize your credit. Recently, my wife and I were having some work done on our home, and the woman who was assisting us found out I was with the Office of Consumer Affairs, and she said to me, "Oh, I was recently a victim of identity theft." She said, I went to refinance my home and found out that someone had taken her personal information, had purchased a condominium in her name and a brand new vehicle.
Oh my gosh.
She was not aware of it, nor would she be until they started defaulting on the payments, and then the bank would be coming to her for payment. So if you monitor your credit report and then flag any information on there that isn't relevant to you, that's one way. And by putting a credit freeze on it, it goes a long way. Recently, about a year ago, I was notified by my mortgage loan company that my information had been hacked. And then that same week, I read an article in the Globe that the office that oversees the federal employees, current and past, had their system hacked. There was over 22 million federal employees, past and present, who had been hacked. I had worked in the federal government in Washington. So in 1 week, in 5 days, my information had been compromised on 2 occasions. I put a credit freeze on it. I forgot about it, and then recently my wife and I went to a store to purchase some equipment, and the individual said, well, you can put it on a credit card. Open up a credit card with us and put it on there. And I said, no, we'll just pay it. He said, no, you get 10% off and just pay it. So I said, all right. So he went in and he said, oh, you need to talk to corporate. They've declined. And I said, what's that about? And I got on the phone and they said, oh, did you recently put a credit freeze on you? I said, yes. They said, oh, you need to remove it. I said, no, I'm going to keep it on. We'll use my wife's information. But that's a one sure way to prevent your information being utilized if in fact you've been information has been compromised. So so identity theft is a big part of what we do. And then the scams that we're getting phone calls. You had mentioned before the show about a relative of yours who had received or been contacted about paying a ransom. That's ransomware, and what they'll do is they'll put a virus in on these websites. You go on the website.
So they send you a link threatening something, and then you click on the link, and then it installs malware onto your computer.
Or you just go and you hit a website, and malware is put on, and then they contact you and say, listen, we freezed your computer in order to get access to all your family photos, all your documents. You need to pay this ransom. So in addition to individuals, we've had police departments, we've had hospitals. In the police departments, as I mentioned, I have a friend who's chief, and they've been hit up 3 times. And he's
you would think people would be afraid to freeze computers that belong to a police department.
You would think so, but they're so brazen, and they're halfway across the world, and yet it's cheaper to pay the ransom than it is to have an expert come in and... is
that what the police departments do usually?
That's what this department did, because it was going to cost them 5 figures to have the to gain access to their police reports, or pay a fraction of that and get everything back. So at the end of the day, sometimes it's cheaper to pay the ransom.
What happens if you just throw away the computer and then just try to access? I mean, don't police departments have their records on a iCloud or a server or something?
Well, it's becoming tougher to do that because, again, to your point, they're using putting it up in the cloud. But there's still small departments who operate on a very small budget. So, and especially when you're talking about individual consumers as well. So, identity theft and scams are a big part of what we do, and we get calls from people all over. You've heard of the grandparent scam, I'm sure. We get calls, and what they'll do, and they become very sophisticated. Someone said to me, how would one know that I had a grandson or granddaughter studying in Spain? Well, social media. You can find out pretty much anything
about anyone.
Exactly. And so at the end of the day, they'll go on and they'll find out that so-and-so's grandson is studying in Paris, and there's pictures of him and his friends. And so in the dead of night, they'll contact that grandparent, and they'll say, we are the authorities, or they'll have a young man on pretending to be the grandson, and they have enough information that they can get by with it. The grandparent is concerned because they're saying, listen, they've been detained, you need to post bond and send it to this address, or we're going to take the next steps to prosecute her. And so next morning they'll get up, they'll go down to, and they'll have the money wired. Recently, a member of my office's mother-in-law, who lives in Texas, whose grandson was studying in Atlanta, Georgia, received a call, was told that he needed to wire $2,000. So she got up the next morning, she went to a well-known entity, and they've been trained to identify these scams, and they said, ma'am, I'd love to take your money, but you're being scammed. And so she left there. She went to a less reputable establishment. They took her $2,000, and then she contacted my colleague, who said, you've been a victim of scam. Your 2000's gone. I've talked to police chiefs who say, Greg, we get a dozen people coming in a week, and these people are halfway around the world. So they're all they're, as we were talking about again before the show, just when you identify an issue, then they find another way to tweak it.
And recently Twitter
Yes, yeah.
Do people call you about that as well? Or
Yes,
they-
yeah,
they
we've
do?
gotten calls about that. So, I mean, it's
Got hacked,
I mean,
right?
and Facebook.
And what does that mean if Twitter gets hacked? So it means that all that personal information is out there.
Potentially, yes.
Right.
Yep. You know, and so I mean, look at department stores, banks, government agencies. Again, it's not a question of whether or not your information or my information is going to be compromised.
Right.
It's just a question of when and how many times.
Right.
So,
you really have to just be really vigilant
Yes,
for every
yeah.
single credit card report, every purchase you make.
exactly.
You just have to be careful. And
Be careful.
Online purchasing.
Yeah, and review your credit
Statements.
report and your
Right.
statements, you know,
Right.
to make sure that what is being attributed
Right.
to you is in fact
Right.
something that you
Wow.
were involved in.
Right,
So-
and then we get a hold of these sleeves.
Yes, yeah, the skimming
Can
sleeves.
we go to mass.gov/.
Well, those are ones we had done up for
Yeah.
our conference, but you can
Okay.
go online and
We
they
can
come
go
in
online. Do you
different
just buy like
different
a
forms.
pack of 26?
Yeah, I brought
Or-
yeah, exactly. I brought these for you.
Just
So
wrap my entire house.
yeah,
in these.
exactly.
just-
You know,
Okay, all right.
you know, as soon as everyone
Right.
purchases that, they'll find a way to
Sure.
be able to penetrate that.
course.
They've even used these skimming devices to go after passports.
Yes,
Since-
that's what I heard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
since
at
2000,
airports.
you have a chip in your passport with all your personal information. They'll skim up against that and they'll download.
Do they have to come, bump up against you, or is they just pass you?
Just pass you.
Wow.
They warn you. It's underneath their shirt, you know. And
Gosh.
yeah, it's scary out there. But you know, if you're just you're vigilant,
Right.
you change your password.
So just
you
wrap your passport in aluminum foil or
I
something,
don't-
and then put it in your.
No,
your,
they
like,
actually
this
have
one?
they have
Yeah.
protective sleeves for
For
passports.
passports as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
This looks like aluminum. I'm just wondering what this is made of. So.
good question.
I know, like tin, just
but
tin foil.
yeah, but at the end of the day, it
Right,
apparently
sure.
works. So,
Good grief.
but yeah, so those are various scams that we're
Right.
involved in. Have you heard about the One Ring scam?
No. What's that? That sounds terrible.
What they'll do is they'll call your cell phone and they'll let it ring once and they'll hang up.
Okay.
If
And then you try to call them back.
call you back. There's a
Right.
group operating out of the Caribbean, and don't ask me how it works, but
Right,
the longer they keep you on the phone, the more they ring up a bill. So
Oh, wow.
they recently my cell phone rang, and I went to get it, and they hung up, and I called them back, and one of my lawyers was walking by, and I mentioned, he goes, "Oh, that's the One Ring scam. I hope you didn't call him back." I
Heck.
said I did. So I contacted my provider, and they nullified the charges.
Oh, gosh.
But yeah, the
And you
one-
got charged for that.
Yes, yep.
Wow.
So, I mean, again,
So how do they get the money off of your provider if you?
not sure how it works,
Gosh.
but they're,
They're quite ingenious.
exactly, and the fake lottery scam, which has been
Right.
around, the IRS scam, and people
Right.
you would think, but now they have a new twist on it. What they'll do is they'll call immigrants and they'll say, you're going to be deported.
Right.
And so they're concerned about, their
Sure.
status, and they'll go ahead and just pay the,
Right.
pay the
Oh,
ransom,
yeah.
if you will.
That's
So
very predatory.
it is,
It's terrible.
and yeah, but so at the end of the day, it keeps us busy.
sure.
But we're out there to protect consumers. I can
Great.
provide you with our toll-free number.
Yes, please.
And,
Just read us the toll-free
yeah,
number.
it's 1-888-283-3757.
Great.
And we also have our website at mass.gov/consumer. So you can go on and you can look up a contractor. You can find out information about various programs.
Right, that's good to
All-
know.
Yeah, absolutely. And all our agencies have a consumer division.
Right.
So, if your home is being foreclosed on, you can contact the
Sure.
Division of Banks. If you have issues with your insurance, you can contact the Division of
Sure.
Insurance. So
Right. So I'm going to go home today, and that's going to be a permanent window that's open. on
there you
that.
go. You'll be all
Right,
set.
that's
Consumer
Affairs.
So sorry
Awesome.
about that.
No worries. You're busy. You're a busy
Yeah,
person.
Exactly.
All right. Well,
well-
this is really good to know.
Yes. Well, thank you again for having me.
Yes, thank you
And,
for sharing all this information and my two little protective
Yeah,
sleeves.
and here's your coffee
And my
mug
coffee
as
mug,
well.
thank you.
So,
Appreciate that.
but again, I appreciate you having me. And
Yes.
if your viewers have any questions, I invite them to go on our website or feel free to call our
Right.
hotline, and we'll assist them any way we can.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you for coming in and
Well,
doing this public service.
Thanks for
That's
having
great.
me. I appreciate it.